Hey friends, thanks for joining us today at the Round Table, where we're in a series called Sacred Cows, Right, Wrong, or Wise. Today's topic is on parenting, the sacred cows of parenting. We know this topic is kind of a very opinionated topic, lots of opinions on this. So we just try to look at the scripture, see what God's design is for parenting, and try to guide you and encourage you. You'll hear us kind of push back on one another throughout this conversation. So it's definitely an iron sharpened ironing conversation, so much so that we actually had to expand it into 2 weeks. So this is part 1 and part 2 will come out next week. And so we hope you enjoy. Full disclosure, friends, as you listen to this, we are back in some old stomping grounds. We're actually not around the round table. Jeff and I are in closets because it's the best soundproof room, you know?
Wow.
And yeah, no comment. And,
no comment. We're not in the same closet, just FYI.
that's good clarification.
We're in different closets.
And Lori is at her crib. And anyway, it's spring break. So we're currently recording over spring break and we're moving different places. And so Lori, you just got back from a little trip. How was that?
I did. It was really good. Just got back from a little trip to California, which means your bodies think it's 8:45 at time of recording, and my body thinks it's 6:45. So if I say anything strange and incoherent, we're going to blame it on Pacific Coast time.
There you go. Sure.
Plus we lost an hour because of time change. So my body clock is all jacked up.
But what do we blame the other things that you say on when you don't travel?
Wisdom and extreme knowledge.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
We today we're in obviously our series. This isn't like a special pod, even though we're recording remotely. We are in the Sacred Cow series, and we are today talking about probably I don't know. I would venture to say it might be one of our most possibly controversial, or at least so personal to people topic. And that is the topic of parenting, the sacred cows and parenting. And so I just think all of us, whether through heritage, whether through the way we were raised, the books that we've read, the way we've been influenced, we hold on to what we believe about parenting very, very tightly. As a matter of fact, Lori, we referenced this, I think, on episode 1, that when we were talking about this, we already started getting into it way back when we were discussing this, right?
Yeah, we did. You and I have different views on something that we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
Or we can talk about it now. I don't care. But yeah, we did. We both, I thought you were wrong and you thought I was wrong. And you know what's funny about it is that we're probably both right.
Yeah. And actually, that's thank you for that, because I do want to mention the tagline, right, wrong, or wise. Because some of these things, we're going to go over some things that are right, or things that what the Bible says about parenting, the responsibility of a parent when God gives us children. But then there's some things that he doesn't tell us when to give our preteen or teenager a phone. You know, he doesn't tell us like when to allow them on social media. He doesn't tell us some of these things. So there's some things that are not a right or wrong issue, but is it the wise issue? And we're just going to try to wrestle with that. Right. So I think that's the first disclaimer today. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what people just hold on to, the sacred cows, right? They hold on to that, not just for themselves, but they put it on other people. And so, Jeff, I think you mentioned this even in episode 1 as well. And Laura, you just alluded to it. What's right, you know, for your family might not be right for my family, and so on and so forth. So we're going to ask for some.
I would just add to that.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I would just add to that, or maybe just to clarify what you're saying. Context is everything with a lot of what we're saying. I mean, there's what we see in scripture. There's what we learn from others, and then we have to go home and apply it, and we have to use wisdom to apply it rightly in our home with our people that God has entrusted to us.
Yeah, that's well said.
Yeah.
Better than I was saying, for sure.
Before we get too much further, I'm so sad that we're not together, because I'm going to hold this up so y'all can see it. You can't see it. This is the first time I've ever printed off the outline and taken notes on the outline. That's how nervous I am about this podcast, because of what you were just sharing, Joey. I mean, so much of this is experiential, and heaven knows I am not a perfect parent. And I have made plenty of mistakes, and I will continue to make them. But I think I've studied extra hard for this one because of what you're talking about, the sensitivity to us coming across as saying, hey, we have all the answers on parenting. What we really have are things that we see that people hold on to so tightly that maybe they're wound up in something that's not actually doctrine, but they're treating it as though it were.
Yeah. And I was talking to Stephanie in a similar vein. I was talking to Stephanie and she was like, wow, as we're talking about this, it's difficult to correct sacred cows without creating new sacred cows. And it's just interesting how, go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
Well, what I was going to say too, one thing, as you're listening to this, you have three very different perspectives in how this has been applied. So I'm completely in the rearview mirror at this point, as far as the active ongoing parenting, because both my kids are out of the house. They're grown. One's getting married. One's living on his own, working, all that sort of stuff. And so a lot of what I'm talking about is in hindsight. Lori's like parent of an only child, teenager, a very specific thing, right? And then Joey, you've got them like from what, age 3
11
up to age
3 to 11.
So those are very different contexts. Just even that, So so much of what we're saying, you may completely agree or disagree. We may completely agree or not with each other, and we have nothing to base that on other than what we see God's word saying, other than gut instinct, other than, you know what I mean? So, it's just so interesting. But anyway, I just thought that three perspectives thing is really interesting as we talk about this.
And I think with all of that said, because you guys are both really good about infusing grace into this, and Lord knows he's humbled me over the years with 4 kids. But I want to say, hopefully you're still willing to, even though there's all these clarifications, you're willing as you listen to this to learn and to question or ask of the Lord, hey, Jeff, Lori, or Joey said this. Is there anything in that you, Lord, have for me? Because while we're not going to tout ourselves as parenting experts, like we aren't here to lead you astray either. So, it's a weird, interesting balance, but hopefully that it's gonna be helpful here today. So, all right. So number 1, what do little dog background has never hurt anybody.
Oh gosh, I tried to find the mute button so fast and it just didn't happen fast enough. So sorry.
No, it's great. It's great. So let's talk about the big picture, what the scriptures say about what parenting is all about. So what kind of stuff do you guys have just to kick us off today?
I'll go first on that one. So, I mean, when I think about it, you have to go back to creation. You have to go back to God making Adam, God saying in Genesis 1, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, have dominion. To fill the earth meant to extend God's glory to all of God's creation. And so the way to do that is to have kids. The way to do that is to populate the earth. He had given, the birds and the animals the same type of mandate, but he didn't say to have dominion over things. So that was something unique that he gave to us. But the way we do that is to have babies. And as we do that, we make disciples of our families, and those disciples go out and fill the earth with God's glory. So that's kind of step 1. In scripture, that's in Genesis 1. I mean,
I'll just follow that up, Jeff, because I like you started in Genesis, because then I'll go, I guess, Genesis 12, which isn't an overtly parental passage, but as God called Abraham and Abraham's descendants to do what? To be a blessing. And I love that you use the word multiply, because we are multiplying blessings, and we're going to talk about basically Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in a way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Like, we are infusing and training and multiplying disciple makers of our children. That's one of the main goals we have as parents.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I kind of ended up looking at some things in the Psalms, and Psalm 78:5 says, for he established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel. And he commanded our fathers that they should teach them to their children, that the generations to come might know, even the children yet to be born, that they may arise and tell them to their children. I just love this concept that all 3 of us are talking about, yes, we are raising our individual children, but we are also parenting the next generation in general. Like, right. we have got to see it as God has established faithfulness within our generation of parents, and it is our responsibility to pass that legacy of faithfulness on to the next generation through our individual children.
Yeah,
that's good. Yeah, and I think this is sort of a redundant statement based on what we've already said, but I just think the passage that is a go-to passage for parents is Deuteronomy 6:4-9. But the whole mandate to Israel from the Lord, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. And these words I command you today shall be on your heart. And then I love the follow-up. You shall then teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise, and on it goes. And it's just really, really good. I think, Lori, I'm diverting a little bit. I'm skipping ahead because I think what this brings up on our outline is the first, the sacred cow that came to my mind right away was one surrounding faith, because all three of us just talked about the importance of imparting faith in Jesus Christ to our children. That's like, we didn't say like, make sure they're getting good grades and go to a good college and is successful in life and all this. I mean, those things we'll talk about too. But every single one, when I said, what's the Bible say about parenting? We all went to faith and disciple making. So one of the sacred cows that I hear a lot regarding faith is, you know what? My kids just have to figure it out themselves. How would you guys respond to that? Or what are some of your thoughts when you hear something like that? Or do you even agree that's a sacred cow?
I agree.
I would agree that it's a sacred cow for some. Yeah, just that you don't want to force your kids into a box. And we said this so many times. Here's the infusion of grace, as Joey said. The context matters for where those parents came from. So if those parents grew up maybe in a very fundamentalist thing, they were forced into everything, then their reaction against that may be, well, you know what? I don't want to do to my kids what my parents did to me. I don't want to force them to believe something, do something, say something, be something that may not jive with them, kind of thing. So a lot of times it's a reaction against. That being said, we have to apply what Scripture teaches to that context and not react against something that makes us then violate what Scripture teaches, which is kind of what we've already talked about.
Yeah. I think it's
that was long-winded, but yeah.
That's definitely a sacred cow. And I think that a lot of it just comes from a mindset that maybe we have a little bit off, a little bit shifted. I think we forget that we're parenting worshipers. Our kids are going to worship something, whether we take them to church or not, whether we try to, quote, force our faith on them or not. Our kids are going to worship something. And if we leave them to figure that out on their own, I think that's dangerous, because there's a lot of things that kids can happen upon to worship, and that's dangerous.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to make it really practical, Brad's talked about this. I mean, you're not going to just put your 15-year-old behind the wheel of a car and say, all right, good luck, figure it out on your own. No, you're going to teach them to drive, or you're going to teach them how not to fall in the pool when they're 2 years old and wandering around the thing. You don't want them to drown. Well, you don't want them to spend their life away from the Lord if you are in fact loving and following the Lord yourself. So if it's important to you, it's going to be important to your kids. So it's going to have the opposite effect, I think. If this is so important to my parents, why don't they talk to me about it? So I think it can have an opposite effect as well. Yeah.
I'm blanking on the author, but I heard him speak about, the information's about 10 years old now, but I thought what he said was really well said. He goes, the Jewish population makes about 1% of our society. But they lead the way in Nobel Peace Prizes and accolades and companies. And he's like, you might have a lot of opinions about them, but why do you think they're so strong in the areas of expertise and what they do? And he goes, from an early age, they sit at the table and they infuse an identity in them. Now, unfortunately, we Christ followers would say that it's misplaced, but imagine if we just did what the verses we just read, which is bringing our children up in the ways of the Lord, and helping our children see Christ and the beauty of Christ and leading them to that. And I think one of the things that we it's difficult in this is that we ourselves say, man, I don't have my act together. So how can I lead my children when I myself? So you know what? I'm trying to figure out my own life and my own spiritual walk.
Mhm.
I'm just going to let my kids do the same. And so I think it just calls us to a higher level of intentionality in our relationship with Jesus as we impart those to our children. So
I think that's true. But I think we have to remember that just like everything else in our Christian walk, our parenting has to be gospel driven as well.
Right.
So even though we might feel like we're not an expert at, quote, leading our children toward faith, we're regularly communicating by what we do and what we say and how we react,
Mhm.
how our kids should feel about the gospel. Does that make sense? Like, we don't have to be an expert in all things faith to be able to say, man, I need God's grace too. I mess up too. So let's talk about how the gospel makes this situation okay, and how the gospel, encourages us how to make a good decision. So I think sometimes we make it more complicated.
Yeah, I think to add to that, Laura, I think it's so good. If the only thing your kids know about it is what you've said to them and nothing they've actually observed, that also sends a message. And so to see us living it out, being honest with our failures, honest about what God's doing in our life. I mean, we were not, with our kids growing up, we were not the family devotional family. Like, we don't have the family Bible. We didn't gather at 8:30 every night and read our passage for the day. We just didn't do that. That's just not us. It would have been very, very forced. But it's been amazing now that my kids are grown and walking with the Lord themselves. What they remember, what they've articulated to me is how, and it's such a huge blessing, but they've articulated just how much we always talked about it, how much it was just a centerpiece of our lives and centerpiece of our family. And they always knew where Mom and I stood on different things. And, it's like, it was intentional without being forced, if that makes sense. And so, and it's interesting because that's the stuff that they remember. They actually don't remember Mom and Dad fighting. They don't remember, but they remember Mom and Dad talking about Jesus. It's like, really? You don't remember us yelling? Wow, that's awesome, because we yelled a lot when you were little. You know what I mean? But It's just cool. It's just cool to think that God allows to stick. Anyway,
and that's an important thing to talk about too. Because I have such a small little family and I just have one, we don't do a lot of scheduled time either, because we're not going in all different directions like Joey's family probably is. Joey, do you guys schedule things in? How does that look for you guys?
Yeah, it's sporadic, and we're not as consistent as we like to be, but I would say at least once or twice a week we are reading something together. And sometimes that can end up averaging 3 times a month, but it's somewhere in that window where we do, because we are going to all different directions. But Stephanie, I really appreciate about her is she grew up doing what you guys are talking about. And so that kind of rubbed off on her and impacted her. And so we've been through books, not just that about missionaries. We've done books we've done different kind of things, or different Bible studies as a family. And so we do, but it again, kind of like it's on the job training, Jeff, I guess is what you were probably describing, is we just try to pick out those moments along the way when it comes to faith, and just identify. Like yesterday I went on a walk. I could tell that one of my sons just needed some dad time. And I was like, okay, I don't know, Lord, just give me some things. And so I just asked him 2 questions on our walk, and we talked about those 2 questions for about 10 minutes. And then the other 20 minutes of the walk, he had questions about how fast the earth spins, where does wind come from, and which way does the earth, how fast and which way does the earth spin? So anyway, and I didn't know the answers. I Googled them. It was great, but it was just that bonding with his heart, and connecting with his heart, which I hope was impactful. But
yeah. And so a sacred cow on the other side of things for a Christian could be, you have to do a family devotional every week, and you're wrong if you don't.
Right.
And Joey, I mean, you got your phone out while you're spending time with your kids. How dare you?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what a sacred cow can look like, is when we flip it around as a Christ follower and go, well, the only way to do it with your kids is X.
Yeah, that's right.
That kind of thing.
And I think you're exactly right. So I sometimes go the other direction, Jeff, and make a sacred cow out of, like, my child's faith should be organic, and we're not going to schedule, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to sit down and have family time, and I'm not going to over spiritualize everything, because I feel like I got a little bit of that. And so I'm so glad you pointed that out, that being intentional about gospel-driven parenting and how we live it out is, in my opinion, a non-negotiable. We have to be intentional about parenting towards the gospel, but how we do that, seriously up for debate. So being intentional about it, not up for debate. How you do it, okay, go for it.
So the listener here could be saying, oh my goodness, then what should I do? Because people want to just be told, I think all of us want to be told, just tell me how to, and I think you're going to hear this a lot from us today, which is, I think what we're probably saying is be intentional, seek the Lord, ask the Lord for what's right for your family. And so I think one of the things, the question that we skipped is, what do we see in society, in our culture today? I think it's the speed in which our lives go, the busyness that happens. And what ends up taking place is that we take shortcuts, or we aren't intentional and we're not asking the Lord. And then what happens is we lack graciousness and patience to pursue our kids' heart and disciplining them, which we'll get to in a second. We either throw our hands in the air and relegate leadership responsibility to other people or other resources, or they can just overreact because they feel out of control because of the busyness, and then domineer without relationship. And so I think what we're saying is, just take a minute often and ask the Lord, hey, what's right? How do I lead my family in faith?
Yeah. And if I could go back to the verse that you took us to earlier, Joey, in Deuteronomy, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, all your might. Deuteronomy 6:6. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. The things that are on your heart that you have learned, I'm putting all that obviously in parentheses, but you shall teach these words diligently to your children. So that implies that we know God's word. That implies that we are growing as a disciple. So what we don't want you to hear us say is just let go and let God. No, there's work for you to do. But honestly, the biggest work, parent, you need to do is on you, parent.
Yep.
And out of that, the overflow of that will impact your kids. Your kids will see that. That's what they're going to pick up. Just telling them something or just making them do things, that will cause a negative reaction, especially if there's no integrity with who they know mom and dad to be. But man, if they see you growing in your relationship with the Lord, if they see that being important to you, if they see that church is something that you desire to be a part of and not something you just kind of, grimace about every Sunday morning, or you're logging online or whatever. It's like, well, we have to do, the things we say in passing are the things that linger for a lifetime with our kids, and the attitudes and actions that they see, that's what they're going to remember. And so we have to be growing. We have to be growing.
And I think that was a point I had in my notes too, Jeff, that we can't pass on to our children what's not first in our own hearts. And the converse to that is, what is on your heart, good or bad, is being passed along to your children. So we have to guard our hearts. We have to guard, what we're allowing to come in, because that is being passed on. We have to be aware of that.
Jeff, you said something about a minute ago about something to the effect of behavior modification and being cautious of that. You didn't use those exact words, but I think that's a good. We don't want just to change action. The couple times the word that was repeated in Deuteronomy 6 is heart. All of this is heart. And actually, there's a book that I really recommend called Parenting is Heart Work by Scott Turansky and Joanne Miller. I think it's biblicalparenting.org. We'll make sure it's in the show notes. But they have lots of good resources. And really, that kind of is a good transition to our next one. I'm going to let you all throw some out there in just a second, but I think I just want to kind of follow the momentum here. Discipline is a big one. It's a divisive issue. People probably just perked up when they heard that we're actually going to talk about discipline, but I don't know what the sacred cow would be. Maybe you guys could help me with that. I just know that there are some, and maybe like, hey, you have to, I don't know, help me out. What are some sacred cows that
you just don't want to say it? You have to spank. You can't spank. You have to, there's grace-based parenting versus law-based parenting. There are different phrases for all of it, but it all has to do with, what I think people frankly have confused, which they call it discipline. I think what we have to realize is that there's a difference between discipline and punishment. We should be disciplining at all times, right? Because the root word of discipline is disciple. So we have to be discipling at all times. We are disciplining our children so that they are being discipled. Does that make sense? If you're not discipling them, they're just off trying to figure it out on their own. Punishment is a different thing. So that's my disclaimer to this particular sacred cow, is that discipline and punishment are different. So let's be sure that the three of us are talking about the same thing, so that the listener knows we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, I think back. So my kids were born. My son was 98. 97. Oh man, I never can remember how old my son was. He was born in 97 or 98.
We're sorry, Jacob.
My daughter was
he
born
loves
in
you.
2000. No, my daughter was born in 2001.
Yeah,
oh dear.
01. Yeah.
Yeah, 2001. I don't know. It's numbers.
I know. Isn't it weird that I know
ahead.
that? I knew it was 01 because it was around 9/11. She learned how to walk. Right?
Better.
Yeah,
that's right. Thank you. Yeah, 9/11. So, during that phase, Joey, you're definitely way too young to remember this, I think. But the Growing Kids God's Way movement, there was a book, there were classes and all that, and then there was a particular ministry that I won't say because I don't want to. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but There was this ministry that had all these resources, and one of them was Parenting the Strong-Willed Child, I think, or something like that. And our son was super, super easy. So the Growing Kids God's Way thing, all the little things to go with that worked perfect for him. We're not working with our daughter at all. Audrey, for those that know my daughter now, most easy, laid back, but man, as a little one, and she was hard, cried, colicky, the whole thing, and just strong willed, man. She was me made over, but in a really tiny body kind of thing. And so somebody said, hey, the Growing Kids God's Way thing isn't working. Do this and it will work. And so we read this book, Parenting the Strong-Willed Child, and blah, blah, blah. We got to the end of it and we're just looking at the book like, literally not helpful. So the folks that gave it to us are like, what do you think? I'm like, unless you want me to hit her with it, I don't know what to do with it, because this book is not helpful for us. And they just thought we were crazy because this has to work, this kind of thing. But anyway, it's just, I think things like that, when we try to superimpose what worked with our kids and we just look at another family and go, well, if you would just do what we do, your kids would be fixed, and that's just not right either. So I think we can put that kind of shame on other parents with that kind of sacred cow mentality of the way to lead your family, the way to discipline your kids, the way, that kind of thing. So, sorry,
I got to tell you a quick story about.
But hopefully,
I've got to tell you a story about Strong-Willed Child book. I have a really good friend whose parents were reading Strong-Willed Child, same sort of thing, because she was a handful and a half, and she found the book and she read it before they did so that she could purposely mess up what they were doing based on what the book said. She did it so that she would react opposite to what the book said.
That's next level.
That's next level Strong-Willed Child.
Yeah. Lori, I like what you said about just what the role of discipline does and the way it plays out in our family, because I think the essence is the goal of discipline is to restore. The goal of discipline is to course correct. It's and so we need to just check.
Punishment. Punishment is to restore, or discipline.
Discipline.
Yeah. To re-guide. Okay.
Yeah. Discipline is meant to restore, to correct, to set on a straight path. And so we have to check our own hearts when the whole, do not sin in our anger. There is nothing like children that will bring out, I've said this before, but the way that I talk to my kids, I would never talk to an adult that way. I get punched in my face, if I talk to, and I'm not abusive with my kids or whatever, but like they bring it out of me. Right. And God gave me children to be sanctified. And I have to check my heart and what's going on in my soul before I bring out any sort of discipline. Right. Because if I do so in anger, then punishment comes out, then guilt is heaped on them. And guilt is something that weighs down a soul. guilt is something that has long-lasting effects. Now, am I perfect in that? No. One of the best parenting advices I got from one of our other pastors on staff, I was like, hey, Don Dumbacher, how do I not screw up my kids? And he goes, good news, you already have. And so, in some ways, it's like give yourself grace. So when I'm giving this encouragement, I'm not just saying, oh my goodness, if you've ever put guilt on your kids, then what I am saying is, I think going back to Lori's point, the goal in all of your carrying out of discipline is to make sure you're pointing them in the right direction, the way they should go.
Yeah, but to add to that, there is a balance to be struck there, and you didn't say this, so I'm probably putting words in your mouth a little bit, but I don't want somebody to hear that your kids should never feel guilty or your kids should never feel shame. Sure. Sometimes your kids need to. That's what they're going to learn from. Now, our job as a parent who is leading them is to help them understand what to do with that.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the gospel comes in. That's when, okay, yes, you did that. Yes, you should feel bad about that. And the gospel is big enough for that too. Mm-hmm. And we have to take them back to that, because if they never feel that, because I've seen parents, we've all seen parents who try to shield their kid from every possible consequence.
Yeah.
Right. And guilt is a consequence. Shame is a consequence. Those kind of things. And man, what a blessing for our kids to be able to learn that in a gospel-centered way under our roof and our protection, than when they get out in the real world, do something stupid and there's no protection anymore.
Yeah, that's really smart. Sure. Proverbs 22:15 says, folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline drives it far from them. And, we've talked about heart, and disciplining hearts. Yeah. We have to be honest with ourselves that our kids are foolish in their hearts, and that it's our job to drive that foolishness far from them, but to do that in a way that, I love what you just said, Jeff, that yes, you're feeling this way. Yes, you made this choice. Yes, these are the consequences, and they're ugly and they're shameful, but the gospel's big enough for that. And that's how we move on is because of that. I love that.
Yeah, for sure. I think consequence is a part of the gospel. And I think it's just important to know that is because without it, there is no forgiveness, but with it, there is. Without the gospel, there is no soul restoration, but with it, there is. And so, absolutely. I like that good clarification there. I think there's a couple phrases or scriptures, 1 Peter 5:3, not domineering over those you're in charge of. Ephesians 6:4, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. So there is this idea that just to not be, I think, a weak man's game, and something that I constantly will have to just check myself is that the way I react says more about me than my children. And so if I'm overreactionary and if I have to constantly yell and intimidate, that shows a weakness in me. And so I just think it's really important that, as we train up our children, although we do have consequences and there is, that we just make sure we're not domineering and we're not provoking. And I think too, we are, all three of us, this is kind of switching tracks a little bit, but all three of us are pretty sarcastic. And so I want to kind of under the realm of discipline, how does that play out in our homes? Because I think that we have a level of sarcasm in our household, but there's this threshold where it's like, time out. Yeah. Hold on. I know that we're really comfortable here, kid, but you don't talk to me that way. And so I think sometimes parents in their discipline can provoke their children through sarcasm and really put them down in a way that is not restorative and not healthy. What do you guys think about that?
Yes.
Yeah, probably. Of course we all do that. But I think that's because we're reacting. We're reacting instead of responding.
I guess I bring it up because I see it as a huge issue on the ball field just out in public or sometimes even in church, because if there's a public thing happening and the child's having a temper tantrum, and then there's this performance-based issue going on inside of the parent where this temper tantrum is a reflection on me. And so they end up putting their kids down publicly, because they're like, oh, this kid, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, there's this maybe with some sarcasm and whatnot. And it's sort of, I think it's just more damaging. I guess that's why I bring it up, is I just know it's a problem in our culture, and I think it could be damaging long-term for our kids.
There's a phrase that just started bouncing around in my head. I heard Andy Stanley say it one time in a conference. He was talking about leadership, because that's a lot of what we're talking about right now.
Right.
Our kids kind of reflect on us. Well, he was talking about in the context of the church. We can't say, we have to stop saying our people won't and start saying we haven't led them to. So we kind of, as parents, have to not, we have to resist the urge to always say our kids won't, my kid won't, and versus saying I haven't led them to be able to do that. Actually look inward and say, okay, what haven't I done as a parent? What am I not modeling? What have I not communicated clearly to them so that they don't do that at the ball field, so that they don't do that at church, so that they don't do that in the classroom? That sort of thing. Because as you were talking earlier, Joey, about not being domineering, kind of the old adage of, if you have to tell somebody that you're in charge, you're not really in charge. To me, what domineering looks like is making sure everyone knows that I'm the boss. That's what that word kind of implies to me. So if you're having to tell your kids that you're the parent, guess what? They forgot for good reason. If your kid won't, well, maybe you haven't trained them up in that area yet. So that kind of exposes the next thing to work on. As a parent.
And the flip side of that is parents of obedient and compliant children get way too much credit, and parents of non-compliant children get way too much blame. You know what I mean? Yes, what you're saying is true. It's 100% true, Jeff. I mean, we have to lead them well. We have to intentionally discipline them, and when appropriate, we have to punish them. But when things are going good, parents get way too much credit. And when things are going bad, parents get way too much blame.
You're absolutely right, because you still have an autonomous individual with a brain and a heart and a sin nature, just like you. And at some point they probably will. I mean, even the best kid is typically going to go through that season where they just buck everything that you say, have said, will say. And, that may or may not be a reflection on you again. Okay. So, may we tease it out this way. A lot of times, the reflection may be on, this is going to be a season that you have to trust the Lord with your kids. Right. And so it's still a reflection on you, and where is your heart? Where is your head in this? So anyway,
that's really good. I think one of the things is we have a couple more, sacred cows that I think I don't want to rush. Just to tease this out, we have schooling, grades, and extracurriculars. We have media, and then we have just some practical encouragement that I think we could give our people. But we just did 2 sacred cows, and we did that in about 35 minutes. And so, hey friends, we just appreciate you. This is going to be a part 1 of 2. And so we encourage you to tune back next week, because we're going to come back with those that I've teased out already and give you kind of our 3s, just things that we've learned over the years and encouragements we would give you. But before we end, our big buckets today were discipline and faith. And so anything that you'd like to just say before we wrap up that conversation?
I think it's a shame that one of your kids hasn't busted into your closet in that door right behind you.
It's because I've trained them right. I've trained them right.
I've literally been waiting for one of them to bust in. I'll just say this, Lori. One of the things you just said about we get maybe too much credit when, I used to think we were killing it, with Selah and Josiah. And I was like, man, we are awesome. And then the more kids we had, I'm not going to point out any of my kids. I don't want to publicly shame them, but there's been some children along the way. And Selah was actually one of them. I can call her out because, as you know, she's really sweet now and loves Jesus and all that kind of stuff. But man,
I thought it was awesome. And then Stephanie just kept reminding me, Joey, this is by the grace of God. Joey, this is by the grace of God. I'm like, yeah, but we're just awesome. And she's so wise to just, and there's been moments over the last 11 years where I have just been like, this is more than I can handle. And I just think, yes, it is. And I think parenting is difficult. And I think we just need to draw back to the Lord and abide and trust in him and seek him. And parenting should just drive us to our knees more. That's the activity that we need to be drawn to. So.
Definitely. That's something I would say too, is that if you don't find parenting completely humbling, probably you should rethink that. When I'm humbled, that's right. Every day I'm driven to my knees. Like I can get teary thinking about it. Every day I'm driven to my knees to say, God, you have to parent this child in the places that I'm not capable, because there are so many places I'm not capable to deal with the situation that fill in the blank. Right now for me, as Jeff alluded to, right now it's a 13-year-old girl in this crazy culture that we live in. So every morning I have to go, God, I just can't do this. You got to do it.
Yeah. One of the things I tell Stephanie, probably at least once or twice a week when we lay our head down for bed is, well, we'll try again tomorrow. Because
I love that.
You just always feel like the job is never done. But all right, guys, thanks for joining us. We look forward to joining you next week for Sacred Cows of Parenting Part 2. See you. Thanks. Thanks for joining the discussion today. If you have any questions or ideas or thoughts that you'd like to share with our Equip team, our roundtable team, please go ahead and send us an email, equip@austinridge.org. And as always, kind of like I mentioned before, we hope you subscribe and share. People can find us on iTunes and Stitcher at Equip Austin Ridge. Thanks again for joining us today.